The galaxy had been silent for a long time, not the quiet of peace but the quiet of fear. Every star system, every planet, every creature knew the rules and they obeyed. The Eldari Council, an alliance of the oldest and most powerful civilizations, had made the laws. Their ships moved like shadows through the cosmos. Their word was law, their will absolute. No one challenged them. No one survived if they tried. Humans were different, small, chaotic, and untested in the eyes of the Eldari. They lived on a pale blue planet called Earth. To the galaxy's rulers, humans were fragile, reckless, and barely worth noticing. But humans thrived in ways the Eldari could not understand. They built cities that reached for the skies, machines that could fly above their clouds, and minds that dreamed of touching the stars. They argued, they fought, they fell, and they rose again. Their survival was messy, unpredictable, and brilliant. For centuries, the Eldari had ignored them. But now, the Council decided it was time to remind humans of their place. Across the void, massive alien ships appeared. They blotted out the sun, their shadows falling over oceans, mountains, and cities alike. Their arrival was silent, but the message was clear. A single broadcast transmitted to every device, every speaker, every screen on Earth, carried only a few words. Submit or be erased. Humanity must obey. Panic swept across the planet like wildfire. People froze in their homes, streets, and offices. Leaders gathered in emergency councils, their faces pale. Scientists scrambled to understand the ship's technology. Military leaders debated strategy. Should they fight? Should they surrender? The choices were terrifying and none felt right. And yet something strange happened. Among the chaos, voices of defiance began to rise. Ordinary humans, farmers, teachers, engineers, felt a fire in their hearts. They did not know what the future held, but they felt something older than fear, something deeper than survival. Humans did not obey tyranny. Not ever. In the midst of this global panic, a young captain named Alara Vance stood in the command room of a small orbital station. Her eyes scanned the reports, her mind racing faster than any computer. She saw numbers, casualties, and impossible odds, but she also saw hope. And she spoke simply but with a power that cut through the panic. We are humans. We do not obey tyrants. We never have. We will not start now. Her words spread like sparks through dry grass. Across the planet, people heard the broadcast and something stirred inside them. Fear did not vanish, but courage began to grow. Families gathered in city squares. Workers stopped their machines to listen, and children drew pictures of ships flying against the alien armada. Humanity had never faced a threat like this, and yet they refused to bow. The Eldari were surprised. In all their history, no species had resisted with such determination. They had crushed entire civilizations before they had even realized the danger. And now, on this small blue planet, humans were standing, shouting, and preparing to fight. As days passed, the attacks began. The Eldari struck with precision, targeting key cities, military bases, and communication hubs. Firestorms engulfed metropolises, oceans boiled with explosions, and millions of lives were lost in the first week. Yet humanity did not surrender. People rebuilt what was destroyed, fought back wherever they could, and refused to abandon their homes. Courage, hope, and stubbornness spread faster than the Eldari's fearsome weapons. In the depths of space, the Eldari commanders began to notice something strange. Humans did not behave like other species. They were not predictable. They did not fear enough to kneel. They did not retreat even when all seemed lost. They adapted, they improvised, and above all, they resisted. Each time the Eldari destroyed one human stronghold, two more seemed to rise elsewhere. Each victory only made the humans stronger, more united. On Earth, families clung to each other as sirens screamed outside. Soldiers and civilians alike found ways to fight, not because they expected to win, but because they could not live with surrender. Children whispered stories of heroes who would save them, and every human, no matter how small, felt the weight of choice. Every single person understood this. They might die, but they would die free. And so, as the Eldari's shadow loomed over Earth, humanity made its first decision. They did not negotiate. They did not beg. They did not bow. They said something that had never been said in the history of the galaxy. No. That word, small and simple, echoed louder than any weapon. Across continents and oceans, humans repeated it in countless ways. A defiant stand at a ruined city, a secret message broadcast to alien monitors, a single soldier refusing to fire a weapon against fellow humans. No. For the first time, a species the Eldari had dismissed was no longer insignificant. They were unpredictable. They were alive. They were human, and the galaxy would never forget that word. The sky above Earth burned with alien ships. Their enormous shadows cast darkness over oceans and cities, yet the humans did not cower. In every corner of the planet, people felt the weight of the Eldari's threat. But instead of surrender, a different feeling spread. A stubborn, fierce resolve. Captain Alara Vance had become a symbol, not because she was the strongest or the smartest, but because she refused to be afraid. Standing on the bridge of a small space station orbiting Earth, she watched the alien fleet move with perfect precision. Every ship was massive, armed with weapons that could vaporize cities in moments. The Eldari expected obedience. They expected fear. They expected humans to kneel, and humans said no. Governments argued, military leaders debated strategy, and scientists calculated probabilities of survival. Every number pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity could not win. Earth would fall. Millions would die. Yet people refused to surrender. They fought not because they were certain of victory, but because they could not live with submission. On the ground, soldiers and civilians alike began acts of defiance. In a ruined city, a group of firefighters used old improvised weapons to drive back alien drones. Children hid in basements, sketching pictures of heroes in impossible battles. Farmers turned tractors into barricades. Engineers converted factory machines into makeshift defenses. Every human contributed in some way, and every act of courage became a spark that spread across the world. Ilara's fleet was small, poorly armed, and nowhere near the Eldari's strength. Their ships were patched together, using old designs and salvaged technology, but human ingenuity knew no limits. Each captain found a weakness in the alien formations. Each crew improvised tactics no one had ever imagined. Ambushes in asteroid fields, decoy satellites, electronic sabotage, all of it worked because humans were unpredictable. The Eldari could not calculate them. They could not anticipate human courage. In one daring raid, Alara's fleet disabled a communication hub on the edge of the solar system. Without it, the Eldari fleet became confused. Commands were delayed. Ships collided in panic. Humans cheered as the first victory in space was broadcast back to Earth. For a moment, the world forgot fear. Hope returned, and people realized something extraordinary. They could fight back. The Eldari, who had ruled through fear for centuries, were stunned. No species had ever resisted this way. No species had ever refused submission so boldly. Commands that once carried unquestionable obedience now met defiance at every turn. For the first time, the Eldari experienced doubt. On Earth, families huddled in shelters listening to the news of Alara's victories. In every home, in every street, the message was the same. Humans could resist. Humans would resist. Ordinary people who had never held weapons joined the effort. They ran messages, repaired broken machines, and defended their homes with courage that astonished even their leaders. Amid the chaos, humans discovered something more powerful than technology: each other. Communities formed overnight. Strangers risked their lives to save neighbors. People shared supplies, built hidden shelters, and protected children and the elderly. Humanity's greatest weapon was its heart, its stubborn refusal to let fear control them. Alara knew the cost of defiance. She watched as entire cities burned, as families were torn apart, as brave fighters fell in impossible numbers. The pain weighed heavily on her, but it did not break her. She inspired her crews not through speeches but through action. She fought alongside them, took every risk herself, and reminded everyone of one simple truth: we are human, and we do not bow. In the middle of the first major battle, Ilara's ship was struck by a massive energy blast. Alarms screamed, warning lights flashed, and the hull shook violently. Her crew expected panic, but humans do not panic when their hearts are determined. They worked together, repairing damage, piloting through danger, and completing the mission. Against every probability, they succeeded. News of human victory spread beyond Earth. Across the galaxy, enslaved planets watched. They had obeyed the Eldari for centuries, knowing fear was the only way to survive. Yet here were humans, small and young, facing impossible odds and refusing to surrender. Something in those worlds stirred. They began to whisper to each other, maybe freedom is possible. Even as the Eldari retaliated, their strikes growing fiercer, humans did not falter. Every destroyed city became a symbol. Every fallen soldier a reminder that courage mattered more than life itself. The Eldari had underestimated something fundamental. Humans do not obey because it is easy or safe or convenient. Humans obey only when they choose, and their first choice had already been made. They would fight. Ilara looked at the stars beyond the station's windows. The alien ships glimmered like deadly jewels, beautiful and terrifying. Yet in the darkness she saw light, the light of humanity's will, unbroken and blazing. She whispered to herself, almost in awe, "They think they can scare us. They don't know us. They have never known humans." And she was right. That first word of defiance, no, had echoed across Earth, across the solar system, across the galaxy. It was not just a word. It was a promise. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would not vanish. Humanity had chosen to fight, and in the hearts of every human a new truth burned bright. The galaxy may obey its tyrants, but humans obey only themselves. The war had begun, and the galaxy was watching. The Eldari fleet loomed over Earth like a storm ready to crush all life beneath it. Yet humans did not falter. They had no massive warships, no fleets of unbeatable soldiers, no centuries of experience ruling the stars. What they had was unpredictability, courage, and a determination that could not be calculated. Captain Ilara Vance led a small, ragtag fleet of hastily built ships. Every vessel had scars from previous battles, patched hulls, and engines that strained under impossible maneuvers. Yet they moved with precision and heart. Each crew member understood one thing: survival was not enough. Humanity would fight, not for safety, not for orders, but for freedom. In the first major space engagement, the Eldari assumed humans would scatter or surrender. They had never seen a species respond like this. Humans attacked, but not in the patterns the Eldari expected. They used the debris of destroyed satellites to hide their ships. They created illusions with reflective panels, making small crafts look like fleets. They turned asteroid fields into deadly traps, luring the Eldari into collisions. Each strike, each maneuver was clever, daring, and terrifying in its unpredictability. On Earth, people watched broadcasts of these battles with a mix of awe and hope. Children drew images of glowing ships dancing through asteroid belts. Families cheered as small victories were announced over radios and screens. Every citizen felt connected to the fight, knowing that courage was not only on the battlefield, it was in every human heart. Farmers and engineers in distant cities sent supplies to launch sites. Civilians created tools, weapons, and repair kits, doing whatever they could to support the fleet. Even in the darkest hours when entire cities had fallen to the Eldari bombardments, humans did not despair. They learned quickly from each loss, adapted to every new threat, and found strength in each other. In underground bunkers, scientists worked day and night to improve old engines. In ruined streets, teachers and students repaired communications equipment. Humans did not wait for orders. They acted together as one. Ilara's fleet had a plan for the next strike. It was risky, nearly impossible, but they had no other choice. Using a series of decoy ships, they led the Eldari into an uncharted asteroid field. Hidden among massive rocks, the humans launched surprise attacks, destroying key supply vessels. The Eldari were forced to retreat temporarily, shocked and enraged. It was the first time in recorded history that any species had dared to damage the Eldari fleet in open space. Back on Earth, the people felt hope for the first time in generations. They realized that the Eldari, despite their vast power, were not invincible. Their fear of humanity began to grow. Across the galaxy, enslaved worlds whispered stories of these brave humans who fought against impossible odds. Slowly, the image of humans as insignificant creatures began to change. In the fleet, Alara moved from ship to ship, encouraging her crews, solving problems, and risking her life alongside them. She had no superweapons, no magical abilities, only human ingenuity and resolve. Yet her courage inspired her team. Every sailor, pilot, and engineer mirrored her determination. In their faces, fear existed, but so did an unbreakable spirit. Humans fought not because they could win, but because they could not surrender. The Eldari began to realize their calculations had failed. Every attack that should have crushed humanity only strengthened it. Humans adapted faster than any algorithm could predict. They found solutions the Eldari did not even imagine. Their ships dodged attacks, struck unexpectedly, and survived situations that should have destroyed them. Humanity's chaos was their power, their unpredictability, a weapon no alien mind could fully comprehend. And yet the human losses were immense. Ships were destroyed, cities leveled, families torn apart. Every victory came with a price. On Earth, survivors mourned those lost but never stopped building, repairing, or fighting. Their sorrow became determination. Their grief became courage. Every human who fell was honored by millions, a symbol of resistance that could not be silenced. Alara stood on the bridge of her flagship during one of the fiercest battles yet. Around her, alarms blared, lights flashed, and the ship shuddered from impacts. Her crew looked to her, expecting panic, but she remained calm, decisive, and unbroken. She reminded them, "We are humans. We adapt, we survive. We fight. Every loss makes us stronger. Every victory shows the galaxy who we are." That evening, after another small but significant victory, humanity celebrated quietly. Families hugged, ships returned from battle, and survivors whispered stories of courage and ingenuity. Every human, whether on Earth or in space, understood the truth. Humanity might be small in the galaxy, but it was alive, unstoppable, and refusing to obey. Across the stars, the Eldari Council convened in panic. They had expected humans to surrender, to kneel, to vanish under their rule. Instead, they had encountered something they could not predict: courage, heart, and ingenuity beyond measure. And for the first time in millennia, the Eldari feared a species not because it was powerful, but because it was human. Alara gazed at the stars, knowing the fight was far from over. The Eldari still outnumbered them. The losses were mounting, but she smiled quietly to herself. Humanity had proven something undeniable. They did not obey, they did not bow, and they would never stop fighting. And in that truth, a spark of hope lit the hearts of every human in the galaxy. The war had reached a level no human had ever imagined. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, oceans boiled under alien bombardment, and millions of lives had been lost in the struggle against the Eldari. Yet despite the destruction, humanity did not falter. In the darkest corners of the planet, in hidden bunkers and underground shelters, the human spirit burned brighter than ever. Captain Alara Vance watched the devastation from the bridge of her flagship. Her eyes traced the stars, but her mind was on Earth, on the families, friends, and soldiers who fought with courage beyond reason. The Eldari expected fear to break them, but fear only strengthened their resolve. Each human loss became a spark, igniting determination in those who survived. In the ruins of cities, people helped each other. Strangers carried children through smoke-filled streets. Families shared what little food remained. Engineers repaired damaged equipment in war zones. Teachers, doctors, and ordinary citizens became warriors in their own way, defending homes, supplying weapons, and organizing relief for survivors. Every human understood that survival was not enough. They had to fight, to resist, to protect the spark of freedom that still lived in their hearts. Ilara's fleet, though battered and small, became a symbol of that resilience. Ships patched with scrap metal and old technology moved through space with determination, striking the Eldari when least expected. Every human who boarded those vessels knew the stakes. They fought not for glory, not for fame, but because the very essence of humanity demanded it. Every attack, every rescue, every act of bravery reminded the galaxy that humans would not bow. Even when the Eldari captured leaders or destroyed strategic positions, humans found ways to resist. Secret messages were sent from Earth to hidden fleets in the asteroid belts. Civilians smuggled critical information past alien blockades. Every act of defiance, no matter how small, became a testament to human courage. Humanity's heart was not in weapons or technology. It was in the refusal to surrender. In one underground city, a group of survivors huddled around a makeshift radio. Children held their parents' hands tightly, their eyes wide with fear, yet the broadcast they heard gave them courage. News of Ilara's fleet ambushing an Eldari convoy in deep space, of human ingenuity turning the tide in small but decisive ways. Mothers and fathers smiled through tears, knowing that hope was alive even in the ashes of their homes. Ilara moved among her crews, visiting each ship, speaking with every pilot and engineer. She did not just give orders, she reminded them why they fought. "We are humans," she said. "We adapt, we survive, and we fight. Fear does not rule us. Courage does. And as long as we stand, the galaxy will see that humanity cannot be broken." Her words were not empty. They carried the weight of shared loss, of burned cities, of friends who had fallen in the fight. And yet they also carried hope, the kind of hope that could not be measured in numbers or calculated in odds. It was the hope that comes from the heart, from the refusal to surrender to tyranny, from the knowledge that humanity was more than flesh and blood. It was spirit, unyielding and unstoppable. Across the galaxy, enslaved civilizations watched. They had lived under Eldari rule for centuries, obeying orders out of fear of annihilation. But now they saw humans resisting. They saw courage where others had only obeyed. They whispered to one another, daring to imagine a different future. Perhaps freedom was not impossible. Perhaps rebellion could succeed. Humanity's defiance was contagious, inspiring hope in species that had long forgotten it. Back on Earth, the Eldari's attacks became more brutal. Entire regions were devastated in attempts to crush human resistance. Yet with each strike, humans adapted. Communities that had been destroyed rebuilt overnight. Refugees became fighters. Survivors became leaders. The Eldari thought destruction would silence humanity. But destruction only amplified their courage. In the silence between battles, Ilara looked at her reflection in the window of her flagship. She saw exhaustion, sorrow, and pain, but she also saw something more. The heart of a species that would never surrender. The Eldari could destroy cities, but they could not destroy hope. They could kill individuals, but they could not kill the spirit that bound humans together. And then came a moment that would define humanity's resolve. An Eldari flagship entered orbit above a critical human city, ready to annihilate it. On the ground, the citizens prepared not to flee but to fight. Engineers rigged defenses, civilians created traps, soldiers readied weapons, and in every heart the same word echoed, no. When the attack came, humans did not hide. They did not panic. They fought with every ounce of strength, every spark of ingenuity, every shred of courage they could muster. Ships flew through the sky. Missiles streaked across the clouds, and humans turned the impossible into reality. The Eldari flagship was damaged, forced to retreat. Humanity had survived another onslaught. Ilara, standing on the bridge, allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She knew the battle was far from over. Thousands would still fall. Cities would still burn. But one truth remained undeniable. Humanity's heart could not be broken. Fear could not bend them. Tyranny could not silence them. They were humans. They were alive. and they would fight until their last breath for freedom. That was the power of humanity. Not weapons, not numbers, not strategy, but spirit, courage, hope, the refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. And in that moment, across the battered planet and the vastness of space, the galaxy saw something it had never seen before. The heart of humanity, unyielding and eternal. The galaxy had watched humanity fight for months, expecting them to crumble, to kneel, to vanish. Yet the humans did not. They adapted, they resisted, and they refused to obey. Their courage, ingenuity, and relentless spirit had begun to unsettle even the Eldari Council. The rulers who had believed nothing could defy them. Captain Alara Vance stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring into the void where the Eldari warships glimmered like distant predators. Her fleet was small and battered, but each vessel carried humans who would not surrender. They had no superweapons, no centuries of experience ruling the stars, only courage, strategy, and a will that could not be measured. The plan was dangerous, almost impossible. The Eldari flagship that led the assault on Earth was stationed near a massive nebula, using its clouds as cover. Alara knew that the human fleet was outnumbered 10-1. A frontal attack would be suicide. But humans had something the Eldari did not: unpredictability. They would strike in a way no one expected. Using decoys and false signals, Alara led a small strike team deep into the nebula. Her ships twisted through asteroid fields, narrowly avoiding collisions, while cloaked drones disrupted Eldari sensors. The massive flagship, confident in its dominance, followed the humans into the trap. And then humans struck. Missiles fired from hidden positions, engines overloaded the alien shields, and the Eldari flagship shuddered as explosions tore through its hull. The galaxy held its breath. For the first time, a species the Eldari had underestimated had turned the tide of battle. Across the stars, enslaved civilizations watched in awe. They had lived under fear and obedience for centuries, and now they saw humans, small, fragile, and untrained, destroying the Eldari symbol of power. Whispers began to spread. If humans can fight, perhaps we can fight too. Back on Earth, people cheered at news broadcasts of the ambush. Survivors in ruined cities hugged, wept, and celebrated in the streets. Even though millions had been lost, hope surged. Humanity realized they were not alone. They had inspired the galaxy without intending to. Resistance was no longer impossible. It was contagious. Alara's voice rang over the comms. "We are human. We are free. You may control the stars, but you cannot control our hearts." Those words were more than a declaration. They were a spark that ignited hope. Formerly oppressed species began to communicate secretly, sharing strategies, sabotaging Eldari supply lines, and offering aid to humans. The Eldari, who had relied on fear to maintain control, began to notice their once absolute authority slipping. In one daring maneuver, humans used captured Eldari technology to block communications across several sectors. Entire fleets of alien ships became confused and disorganized. Small strike teams piloted by humans attacked key supply convoys and repair stations. The Eldari were forced to retreat, at least temporarily. For the first time, their dominance had been seriously challenged. On Earth, families celebrated, but they did not forget the cost. Millions had perished in the struggle. Cities were leveled. Fields burned. Survivors mourned their loved ones while continuing to fight, rebuild, and support the fleet. Human courage was not without pain. It was forged in sacrifice and determination, and every life lost became a symbol of resistance. Alara knew that victory was still far away. The Eldari were vast and powerful, and the humans' fleet was small, but she also knew something the aliens could not understand. Humanity's heart was limitless. Fear could not control it. Destruction could not silence it. Every setback, every loss only made humans stronger, smarter, and more determined. Across the galaxy, more species began to act. Planets that had been forced to obey now started sending messages of solidarity to humans. Small fleets joined in, providing intelligence, resources, and manpower. The Eldari, who had once ruled the galaxy through obedience, were confronted with a force they could not predict. Unity born from courage and choice. Alara watched the communication screen as a message came from a distant star system. "We will stand with you. Humanity has shown us freedom is possible." She smiled, quietly, knowing that the war had grown beyond her fleet, beyond Earth. Humanity had lit a fire across the stars. The Eldari Council convened an emergency. Their arrogance had been shattered. For the first time, they faced doubt, fear, and the possibility of defeat. No longer was humanity insignificant. They had become a symbol, a spark, and now a rallying point for the oppressed. In the battle over the nebula, Ilara's fleet had destroyed critical Eldari ships, disrupted supply lines, and proven that humans could fight smarter, faster, and with courage that machines could not calculate. The Eldari flagship that had once struck fear across Earth now limped back into open space, battered and confused, and humanity, though battered and exhausted, was stronger than ever. Ilara turned to her crew, her voice steady and full of pride. "This is only the beginning. The galaxy has seen what we are capable of. We will fight. We will survive. And we will show the universe that humans do not obey. They endure, they adapt, and they win." Across the stars, enslaved civilizations whispered and plotted. Hope had returned. Resistance had begun. And for the first time, humans realized their fight was not just for themselves. It was for every being who had been silenced by tyranny. The tide had turned. Humanity had survived, not because they were the strongest, but because they were human, unpredictable, courageous, and unbreakable, and the galaxy would never forget it. The galaxy had changed forever. The Eldari, once absolute rulers, were no longer untouchable. Their fleets that had inspired fear for centuries, were now vulnerable. Humanity had shattered the illusion of invincibility. Across the stars, enslaved species whispered hope, their long-suppressed voices rising for the first time. Captain Ilara Vance stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the remnants of the Eldari warships retreat through a shattered nebula. The human fleet was battered and scarred, but it remained alive, resilient, unbroken, and fiercely determined. Every ship carried humans who had survived impossible odds, who had stared death in the face and refused to bow. Humanity had become a symbol, not just of resistance but of courage itself. The Eldari Council had miscalculated humanity. They had believed that fear, destruction, and overwhelming power would be enough to control a species. They had assumed humans would obey like every other civilization. But humans were different. They fought with unpredictability, they endured unimaginable loss, and they adapted faster than the Eldari could comprehend. Their courage was a weapon stronger than any laser or warship. Alara's fleet moved strategically, coordinating with rebel species across the galaxy. Formerly enslaved planets provided intelligence, supplies, and backup fleets. Worlds that had once cowered under Eldari rule now fought alongside humanity. They had seen the humans resist, and they had learned that freedom was possible. The galaxy was rising against its oppressors, united by the example of a single, unyielding species. In one decisive strike, humans led an assault on the Eldari Central Command Station, a massive fortress in orbit around a dead star. The Eldari had assumed no force could breach it. They were wrong. Using cunning tactics, ambushes in asteroid belts, and coordinated strikes with allied species, humans overwhelmed the defenders. Explosions ripped through the station, lights flickered and died, and the once mighty fortress fell. Humanity had struck the heart of the Eldari Empire itself. Back on Earth, people celebrated quietly. Cities that had survived the previous bombardments sent messages of victory to the fleet. Families hugged, children danced, and tears of grief and relief mingled on the same faces. Humanity had lost so much. But now it had proven that even against the greatest power in the galaxy, courage, determination, and unity could prevail. Ilara moved through her fleet, Visiting each vessel, speaking with the crews who had endured the impossible, she did not speak of victory as an end, but as a beginning. The Eldari will not surrender easily, she told them. They have ruled for centuries. But they have learned something they never expected. Humans do not obey. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. And now the galaxy has seen our truth. Her words inspired more than just her fleet. Across allied planets, humans and former slaves coordinated resistance. Supply lines were disrupted, communications sabotaged, and fleets trapped. The Eldari could no longer maintain their control through fear. Every strike by humans reminded the galaxy that oppression could be challenged, that tyranny was not eternal. Even in defeat, the Eldari struck back. Their attacks grew desperate and brutal, targeting cities and fleets wherever they could. Yet every attempt only reinforced humanity's determination. Survivors rebuilt. Pilots returned to battle despite injuries. Engineers repaired damaged ships under fire. Humanity's endurance was unmatched. Every setback, every loss became fuel for the next victory. Ilara watched the galaxy carefully, noting every weak point, every opening. The Eldari were still powerful, but they were losing their grip. The alliance of humans and liberated species grew stronger every day. Entire sectors once enslaved were now joining the fight openly, their ships striking at Eldari supply convoys, their people rebuilding after attacks. The galaxy was no longer silent, it was alive with hope, courage, and rebellion, and in the center of it all, humans remained the spark. They were not the largest, not the strongest, not the most advanced, but they were unpredictable, courageous, and unbroken. Every human who stood against the Eldari, every act of resistance, every life given for freedom, became a message that echoed across the stars. Obedience is not required. Courage is everything. In the aftermath of a particularly fierce battle, Ilara stood alone on the bridge of her flagship. The stars stretched infinitely before her, the void filled with debris from destroyed warships. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "The galaxy can obey, but it will not obey us. Only we obey ourselves." It was true. The Eldari had ruled through fear, but fear had failed them. Humanity had rewritten the rules. They had shown the galaxy that strength was not only in weapons or fleets, but in heart, will, and unity. The Eldari could retreat, regroup, and strike again, but the example had been set. The galaxy would never forget it. Across liberated worlds, survivors celebrated quietly but resolutely. Humans and their allies had shattered the old order. The Eldari Empire, once unchallenged, had been exposed as vulnerable. The first steps toward freedom for countless civilizations had begun. And at the center of this rebellion stood humanity, small, determined, and unbreakable. Ilara turned from the stars to her crew, her voice strong. "We have not won yet, but we have begun something the Eldari cannot stop. Remember this. Courage cannot be destroyed, hope cannot be silenced, and humanity cannot be broken. We are alive, we are free, and we will carry this fire across the galaxy." The fleet responded with a unified cheer, not of triumph, but of resolve. Humanity's war was far from over, but the impossible had been achieved. The old order had been shattered. The galaxy had seen what it meant to defy the Eldari, and every being who witnessed it knew one truth. Humanity was unstoppable. The Eldari were defeated. Not completely, for their remnants still lingered in distant systems, but the once great empire had been shattered. Across the galaxy, enslaved worlds were free, and the echo of rebellion spread like wildfire. Humanity had done the impossible. They had stood against the most powerful rulers in the galaxy and survived. Captain Ilara Vance looked out from the bridge of her flagship at the stars. Every light represented a system, a world, a life touched by humanity's struggle. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of: courage beyond reason, hope in the darkest hours, and the refusal to bow to tyranny. They had proven something profound. Strength is not measured by size or technology alone, but by heart, unity, and determination. On Earth, the survivors emerged from shelters and bunkers. The cities were scarred. The ocean still carried the marks of war, and the skies were streaked with smoke. Yet humanity did not weep for itself. They celebrated what they had achieved. Families hugged, children laughed, and strangers shared stories of bravery. Every loss had been honored, every hero remembered. Humanity had survived against impossible odds, and now it stood taller than ever. Across liberated worlds, humans became symbols of hope and inspiration. Planets once under Eldari rule sent messages of gratitude and alliance. Rebel fleets, rebuilt and strengthened, worked alongside humanity to stabilize regions of space, protect vulnerable civilizations, and ensure that tyranny could never return. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Fear can control temporarily, but courage can inspire forever. Ilara's fleet, though battered, was stronger in spirit than ever. Pilots, engineers, soldiers, and civilians worked together as one force, united not by command but by choice. Humanity had taught the galaxy a truth the Eldari could never understand. Obedience is not power. Courage is. Every act of bravery, every life given to protect freedom, had created a wave that no empire could stop. Even the Eldari survivors knew they had underestimated humans. They had ruled through fear for centuries, believing that no species could resist. But humans had shown them that strength is in heart, not just weapons. In spirit, not just numbers. Their tactics were clever, but their greatest weapon had been something no technology could replicate: will. The Eldari would retreat, regroup, or strike again, but the galaxy had seen the truth. Humanity had changed everything. On Earth, children drew pictures of ships soaring through space, carrying humans and allies into battles of courage. Citizens rebuilt homes, schools, and communities, ensuring that the future would carry the lessons of war. Every story of survival, every act of resistance became part of the legacy humanity left across the stars. Ilara stood on the bridge, quietly observing the galaxy. She thought of all the lives lost, all the sacrifices made, all the battles endured. She thought of her crew, of families and friends, of the ordinary people who had done extraordinary things, and she smiled, knowing that humanity's story had only begun. We did not bow. We did not kneel. We said no, and the galaxy listened, she whispered. Her voice carried the weight of centuries of lives, of courage that had defied impossible odds. Humans had not only survived, they had become a symbol, a force that reminded the universe that even the smallest species, the most overlooked, could change everything. The galaxy, once silent under Eldari rule, now rang with voices of freedom. Humans and their allies established a new order, not a rule imposed by fear, but a network of cooperation, respect, and choice. Every civilization had a voice, and humanity had shown them that courage could bind worlds together stronger than any empire ever could. In space, Ilara's fleet flew toward new frontiers. New colonies were being formed, new alliances solidified, and humanity's influence expanded, not through domination but through example. Humans did not seek to conquer, they sought to inspire, and inspiration, they had learned, was the strongest force in the universe. Back on Earth, people looked up at the night sky and felt something they had never known before: pride. Not arrogance, not superiority. Pride in being human. They had faced annihilation and refused to surrender. They had faced fear and chosen courage. They had faced the galaxy and said no. And when humans said no, the stars listened. Ilara turned from the window and addressed her fleet one last time. The galaxy has learned who we are. We are humans. We endure, we adapt, we fight, and we do not obey except to our own will. Let this be the legacy we leave: courage, hope, and freedom for all who choose it. The fleet responded, a chorus of voices echoing through the ships and across the void. Humans would never stop, never surrender, and never bow. They had rewritten the rules of the galaxy, not with weapons alone, but with spirit, heart, and unity. And so humanity entered a new age. The Eldari Empire was broken. The galaxy was alive with choice and freedom, and humans stood at the center not as conquerors but as beacons of courage. The stars had once obeyed their tyrants. Now they obeyed something far greater, the will of humans, unyielding, unstoppable, and eternal. The galaxy had seen it. The galaxy had remembered it. And humanity, small, fragile, and imperfect, had become legendary.